Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that, well, might feel a bit surprising. Ailurophobia. That's the persistent and pretty intense fear of cats.
Yeah, the word itself, it's Greek, right? Allolos for cat.
And phobos for
Yeah.
fear. Exactly. You might also hear it called felinophobia, ailurophobia,
Gatophobia sometimes.
gatophobia, right? Or just, cat phobia. And a person with this, they're called an ailurophobe.
It really is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, for so many people, cats are just, well, beloved pets.
Totally.
But for others, even just thinking about a cat can cause real distress. This isn't just, like, not liking cats.
No, it's a proper phobia.
A powerful phobia, yeah. It can seriously restrict their lives.
Which makes you think about how anxiety can show up in so many different, sometimes unexpected ways.
Definitely.
And, even if a fear of cats seems maybe unusual to some of us listening, doing this deep dive into a specific phobia like this, it can actually shed light on anxiety generally and how fear works.
It's a good window into it.
Okay, so let's unpack this then. How common is it compared to other animal fears?
Well, interestingly, when you look at all the different animal phobias, ailurophobia seems to be relatively uncommon.
Less common than, say, snakes.
Spiders.
Exactly. Less common than ophidiophobia, that's snakes, or arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. Those tend to be reported more often.
Okay, good to know. So maybe not as widespread, but for the people who do have it, what does that actually, look like day to day? What kinds of reactions are we talking about?
Right. Well, the reactions can really vary depending on how intense the phobia is for that person.
Sure.
For some, just the thought of a cat can trigger like full-blown panic, intense fear.
Just thinking about it.
Yeah,
Oh.
even just imagining running into one, even if it's unlikely, can be really distressing.
Right.
Shows how powerful our minds are in generating fear, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not always about the immediate reality. So what about actual encounters or even things associated with cats?
Well, obviously, actual physical contact with a cat is a big trigger. That's understandable.
But for some, even just seeing pictures of cats, photos, videos, sometimes even cartoon drawings can set off that fear response.
Wow. So it's quite pervasive.
It can become so overwhelming that it really starts to limit what they do. Like they might actively avoid going to a friend's house if they know they have a cat.
Just to avoid any chance of seeing it.
Exactly. It really highlights how anxiety can just sort of shape your daily decisions.
That sounds incredibly restrictive. Not just, oh, I prefer not to, but actively changing your life around it. Are there other, maybe less obvious triggers?
Oh, absolutely. Some people with ailurophobia get extremely anxious just hearing cat sounds.
Like meowing or hissing.
Yeah, meowing, hissing, even if they can't see the cat. The sound alone is enough.
Just the sound.
Yeah. And there was even this one documented case, someone who couldn't touch soft, like fur-like clothing.
Because it felt like cat fur.
Exactly. The texture reminded them so strongly of a cat's fur, it triggered their aversion. It's that stimulus generalization. The fear spreads to related things.
Wow, that really shows how deep it can go. Beyond the animal itself to textures, sounds. So where does a fear like this even start? What are the potential causes?
That's the big question, isn't it? And like a lot of specific phobias, nailing down the exact cause for one person can be tricky. But there are common theories.
Okay.
One pattern we often see with animal phobias is that they frequently trace back to early childhood.
So something happened when they were young.
Possibly. Formative experiences then seem to have a lasting impact. Another major theory is a single traumatic incident.
Like being attacked by a cat.
Right, being attacked or maybe scratched badly, or even just witnessing a cat attack someone else. That kind of scary event could definitely create a really strong, lasting negative link.
Yeah, you can see how that would stick with you, especially as a child.
It's quite sobering thinking how one bad moment could shape things so much later on.
Definitely. But does it always have to be a direct negative experience like that? Are there other ways someone might develop it?
Yes, absolutely. Learning through observation is also thought to play a big part.
So seeing someone else be afraid of cats.
Exactly. A child, for instance, might see a parent or caregiver react with intense fear around cats again and again. And they might kind of internalize that fear themselves, even if they've never had a bad run-in with a cat personally.
They just learn that cat's scary.
Pretty much. And then there's also just being exposed to, negative information about cats, maybe exaggerated stories or myths that could contribute to.
So direct experience, watching others, even just hearing negative stuff.
Yeah.
multiple paths leading to the same phobia.
Seems that way, yeah. It highlights how we learn fear, both directly and indirectly.
Okay, so for someone living with this, and it's really impacting their life, what are the options? What kind of treatments work?
Well, the main treatment, the one that's really widely accepted and used for animal phobias like Ailurophobia, is exposure therapy.
Right, I've heard of that. Can you explain a bit more how it works for, say, a fear of cats?
Sure, it's all about gradual, systematic exposure. You start with things that cause maybe only a little anxiety, and you slowly work your way up.
Okay.
The really crucial part is that the person only moves to the next step when they feel comfortable, or at least significantly less anxious, with the current one.
So it's paced by them.
Entirely.
Oh, yeah.
The goal is to face the fear in a safe, controlled way, letting the brain learn over time that the feared thing isn't actually dangerous. It helps reduce the fear response. Habituation, it's called.
Can you give us, like, a concrete example? How might that look for someone with Ailurophobia?
Okay, yeah. So there was this one case where someone started therapy by just touching soft fur-like fabric. That was the first step.
Okay, starting with the texture associated.
Exactly. Once they were okay with that, maybe they progressed to looking at pictures of cats. Then perhaps interacting with a realistic toy cat.
Building up slowly.
And eventually, maybe, under careful guidance, having brief interactions with a very calm, friendly live kitten.
A kitten, interesting.
Yeah, in that specific case, the person's main fear was actually of full-grown cats. So starting with a kitten was part of that gradual approach. And the same basic method, this gradual exposure, it's used for other animal phobias too, like cynophobia.
The fear of dogs.
Right. It's a well-established technique.
That step-by-step process sounds key. Letting people build tolerance. What about medication? Are there specific drugs for ailurophobia?
That's a good question. And interestingly, no, there aren't any medications specifically designed to treat ailurophobia itself.
Oh, okay.
However, there has been some research suggesting a potential link between a drug called D-cycloserine.
D-cycloserine.
Yeah, it seems it might improve the results people get from exposure therapy when it's used alongside it.
So it helps the therapy work better, potentially.
That's the idea. It's thought it might help the brain learn new, non-fearful connections more effectively during the therapy sessions, maybe speed things up a bit.
That's an interesting angle, using meds to boost the psychological therapy.
Exactly. But the core treatment really remains that exposure therapy, helping the person unlearn that conditioned fear.
Well, this has been really insightful. A proper deep dive into something many people might not think much about. It's definitely a reminder, isn't it? We all feel differently about animals, but for some people, something as common as a cat can be a source of real, significant distress.
Absolutely. And I think the key takeaways are, ailurophobia is real. It can have a big impact. It often starts early or is learned.
But there are effective ways to treat it.
Yes, treatments like exposure therapy really can make a positive difference.
And thinking about all this, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Considering how varied fears can be, what other really common things out there might be a source of major anxiety for some people?
That's a great question to ponder.
It really encourages you to think about how subjective fear is, and maybe try to understand perspectives that are, well, very different from your own. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.